Hello, I'm Sophia Gray, and I'm 28 years old. If you're enjoying stories about ambition, family betrayal, and the ruthless world of high finance, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button for more compelling tales like this one. In TV, the CNBC host was excitedly waving his arms on screen, with a photo of me from 6 months ago at the TechCrunch Summit serving as the backdrop. Back then, I had barely concealed exhaustion under my eyes and wore an unremarkable gray hoodie. But now, beneath that photograph, a bold, glaring golden headline proclaimed, "The $300 million unicorn, how Sophia Gray conquered Silicon Valley." I glanced at the clock on the wall. 6:05 in the evening. The news had just aired 5 minutes ago. Here in my luxury apartment in downtown San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge's silhouette flickered in and out of view through the evening mist outside my window. My phone lay on the marble coffee table, vibrating frantically like a thing possessed. The buzzing mingled with the news broadcast, creating an almost satirical symphony. My screen was flooded with messages from so-called old classmates, former colleagues, and even distant relatives I had never met. When you are penniless, you become an island. When you are worth $300 million, you become a mountain that everyone wants to climb. Just then, a new message cut through all the noise, claiming the most prominent position on my screen. The sender, Victor Gray. I picked up my phone, my fingertip hovering over that name for a moment. I glanced at the television where the news continued, analyzing what impact my cash flow might have on the market. This was typical Victor. He never checked my social media, did not know where I lived, and could not even remember my birthday. But he certainly subscribed to the Wall Street Journal and followed all the major business networks. He knew me through the news. The text message was characteristically brief, carrying that familiar tone of command, as if there had been no 3-year Cold War between us, as if he were simply instructing his secretary to schedule a meeting. Greater than, saw the news, come home for dinner tonight at 7. The whole family will be there. It's time to discuss business. The whole family. I stared at those words, a bitter laugh rising in my throat. If today's headline had read, "Sophia Gray's startup fails, files for bankruptcy," that text message would never have appeared. In Victor Gray's eyes, I might never have been family until I became a walking asset. I could not help but think of that cold, damp afternoon 8 years ago. In Columbia University's courtyard, rain had soaked my graduation gown. Around me, the air was filled with the fragrance of flowers and champagne, everyone embracing. Only I stood alone beneath the statue, clutching my diploma marked magna cum laude. That day, Victor did not come. His secretary's explanation was, "Mr. Gray has a very important business lunch." That evening, I returned to my empty apartment and swore I would never again live seeking his approval. Now, 8 years later, that man, who would not waste time attending my graduation ceremony, had sent a dinner invitation within 5 minutes of seeing news of my company sale. How ironic, for Victor, $300 million had finally purchased a ticket to membership in this family. I turned off the television and the room fell silent. "Siri, call David Wells," I said to the air, my voice calm enough to surprise even myself. The phone was answered almost instantly with the rustling sound of papers in the background. "I saw the news, Sophia." David's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Congratulations! You're now America's most eligible single woman, but I'm guessing your expression doesn't look like you're about to pop champagne." "Victor contacted me," I said, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looking at the woman in the reflection wearing a silk blouse with perfect makeup. Less than 5 minutes after the news aired. "Classic Gray style," David commented mercilessly. "Since he's smelled blood, this dinner is probably going to be a trap. He won't just want your money, he'll want your reputation to salvage Gray Real Estate Group's plummeting stock price. I know. I turned toward the walk-in closet, my fingers sliding across rows of expensive designer dresses, finally stopping at a deep red suit. Red represented aggression, warning, blood. "Is our gift ready?" I asked. "Everything's in my briefcase." David's tone became serious. "Stock acquisition agreements, default notices, and the board restructuring proposal. Sophia, you need to think carefully. Once you pull out those documents, you won't have a father anymore." I faced the mirror, applying crimson lipstick, watching myself produce a perfect, utterly cold smile in the reflection. David, from the moment he missed my graduation ceremony, I stopped having a father. I hung up, grabbed the stack of documents representing power and revenge, and strode out of the apartment. Since he had invited me through the news, I would give him a headline more explosive than any news story. The drive to the Gray family estate always seemed particularly long. It was an old-style mansion in the wealthy district of Long Island, with massive wrought iron gates bearing the Gray family crest, an eagle clutching gold coins. As a child, I thought it looked majestic. Now I could see that the eagle's eyes held only greed. My Tesla Model S slowly entered the driveway. Before I even got out of the car, I saw my mother, Eleanor Gray, standing at the entrance. She wore a conservative beige cardigan, her hands nervously twisting together. Seeing my car stop, she hurried over, her eyes mixing joy with concern. "Sophia," she said through the car window, seeming to want to touch my face but restraining herself. "Dear God, is the news true? Those numbers? Are they real?" You see, even my mother's first reaction was to verify the numbers. "It's true, Mother," I said, getting out of the car and giving her a polite hug. She smelled faintly of lavender, the only warmth in this cold house, though unfortunately, that warmth was too weak. "Victor is waiting for you inside." Eleanor lowered her voice, looking nervously at the brightly lit mansion behind her. "His mood is complicated. You know, Gray Real Estate hasn't been doing well lately. Your success makes him both happy and somewhat embarrassed. During dinner, please just go along with him, won't you?" Go along with him. This was Eleanor's lifelong survival philosophy. In this mansion, she was Victor's perfect accessory, without voice or temper, like an exquisite ornament. "I'm not planning to go along with him anymore, Mother," I said, adjusting my suit cuffs and feeling the weight of the briefcase. "What?" Eleanor looked stunned. "Nothing. Let's go inside." Pushing open the heavy oak door, the air in the dining room seemed frozen. The massive crystal chandelier cast cold light. Victor Gray sat at the head of the long table, holding a glass of expensive red wine, though he was not drinking, just staring at the swirling dark red liquid as if calculating its vintage value. Hearing footsteps, he looked up. There was no warm reunion after a long separation. He looked me up and down, his gaze like someone appraising an antique that had just sold for a high price at auction. "You changed cars," was the first thing he said to me. "Tesla? I don't like these toys without engine roar. Since you have money now, have your secretary order you a Bentley tomorrow. That would be more fitting for a Gray family member." I pulled out the chair opposite him, the position of an opponent at a negotiating table, and sat down. "I prefer quiet, Victor. It helps me distinguish who's lying and who's telling the truth." Victor's eyes narrowed slightly, clearly displeased with my barbed attitude, but he restrained himself because I was no longer the little girl who needed him to pay her tuition, but a $300 million patron. "Sit," he waved his hand, signaling the servants to serve dinner. "Since you're back, put away those rough manners from outside. Your mother made your childhood favorite borscht." I looked at the elegant soup bowl in front of me, feeling no appetite whatsoever. "Let's cut to the chase," I said, leaning back in my chair with my arms crossed. You saw the news, you checked the net worth. Now that you've called me back, is this to celebrate or to harvest? Victor set down his wine glass, the crystal making a sharp clink against the table. Watch your tone, Sophia. I am your father, he frowned, assuming the authority of a patriarch. I know your little company sold for some money, but that was just luck. Tech stocks are volatile. You need someone experienced to help you manage your assets. Besides, Gray Real Estate has a major financing plan recently. Here it came. Before even the main course was served, he could not wait to bare his fangs. He did not want me to inherit the family business. He wanted my $300 million to become Gray Real Estate's working capital, to fill the holes caused by his poor decisions. I looked at this gray-haired yet still arrogant man, and the last vestiges of any illusions about family affection completely shattered. So you want me to invest my money in your company? I asked, knowing the answer. Not invest, entrust me to manage it, Victor corrected with shameless righteousness. You'll become a shareholder of Gray Real Estate, though of course decision-making power remains with me. After all, you're still young and don't understand how this kind of real economy operates. I don't understand? I laughed, the sound particularly harsh in the spacious dining room. I bent down and lifted the black briefcase from beside my feet, placing it on the pristine white tablecloth. Victor, there are some things the news didn't report. Under Victor's puzzled gaze, my slender fingers slowly fastened on the briefcase's locks, producing a click like a gun being cocked. For instance, I didn't just sell my company, I also swept up all your floating debt on the secondary market. The suffocating silence lasted exactly 10 seconds. Victor Gray's facial muscles twitched. He stared at that black briefcase like it was a ticking time bomb. Then his face, accustomed to giving orders, forced out a stiff, almost absurd smile. Sophia, that's not a funny joke. He picked up his wine glass again, but this time I clearly saw his fingers trembling. The red wine created irregular ripples against the glass walls. Do you know how much capital it takes to purchase Gray Real Estate's floating debt? That's not a game you can play just by selling a small workshop. Don't think that learning a few financial terms in Silicon Valley gives you the right to come back and intimidate your father. I said nothing, simply opened the briefcase calmly. That click sounded again, crisp as a note struck on Victor's nerves. I pulled out a 40-page debt transfer agreement and a bank-stamped debt confirmation letter. I did not hand the documents to him, but slid them across the long table. The papers glided with momentum, stopping precisely beside his untouched stake. Gray Real Estate's B-grade commercial paper issued last quarter, totaling $45 million, originally held by a private equity firm called Vista Capital. But this debt contains a very harsh acceleration clause. If the issuing entity's debt ratio exceeds 65%, the creditor has the right to demand immediate payment. I watched Victor's face change from ruddy to pale, then from pale to ashen. He grabbed the documents roughly, flipping through them violently, the papers crying out under his hands. Last Friday, Moody's downgraded Gray Real Estate's credit rating, I said methodically, picking up my napkin to dab the corners of my mouth, though I had eaten nothing. This triggered the default clause, and I, as the sole holder of this debt, now notify you, Victor, you have 48 hours to repay the $45 million in principal plus interest. You're insane. Victor slammed the documents on the table, sweeping the crystal wine glass to the floor where it shattered. The deep red wine splashed on the carpet like a pool of shocking blood. My mother Eleanor, who had been silent, screamed in fright and covered her mouth. "That's your father's company!" Victor roared, the veins in his neck bulging, his gentlemanly facade completely torn away. "What are you trying to do? Drive me into bankruptcy? I'm your dad. My blood flows in your veins." I looked coldly at his loss of composure. 8 years ago, when I was eating expired bread in a Brooklyn basement because I could not afford rent, he had said the same thing. "You're a Gray family member. Don't embarrass us outside." But he never sent me a penny. "Let me correct you, Victor." I stood up, placing my hands on the table and looking down at him. "In commercial law, there are no fathers and daughters, only creditors and debtors. You taught me that business is business." "You—" Victor's hand shook with rage as he pointed at my nose. "What do you want? If I go bankrupt, you won't get your money either. What good does Gray Real Estate's collapse do you?" I didn't say I wanted money. I straightened my suit jacket collar, revealing that perfect smile I had practiced countless times. "I want control. Tomorrow morning at 9, Gray Real Estate Board meeting. I'll attend with my lawyers. You can choose to accept board restructuring gracefully, or—" I glanced at the broken glass on the floor, "end up like that glass, shattered and worthless." With that, I picked up my briefcase and turned toward the door. "Sophia, stop right there!" Victor roared behind me. "You cold-blooded monster! Your mother is still here and you're just walking away." I stopped and turned my head, looking at my mother. Eleanor cowered in her chair, tears welling in her eyes, her face full of terror and helplessness. She looked at me with strange fear, as if I were not the daughter she once held in her arms, but an invader. "Sophia," she called my name tremblingly. "Don't do this. He's your father. We can talk this through." My heart felt a sharp stab of pain, but it was quickly covered by thick ice. "Mother," I said softly, "if you're unhappy in this house, call me any time. I have enough money to ensure you can live without looking at anyone's face. But if you choose to stay here and continue playing his accessory, that's your choice. I respect it, but I won't join your performance." Without giving them another chance to speak, I pushed open that heavy oak door and walked into the night. The Long Island evening breeze carried the salty smell of seawater, feeling somewhat cold against my face. But I had never felt so clear-headed, so free. Sitting in the Tesla's driver's seat, I did not immediately start the car. I looked in the rearview mirror at that brightly lit mansion, watching Victor's figure pacing frantically by the window. My phone vibrated, a text from David. "Did the fish take the bait?" I replied. "He swallowed it whole. Prepare for tomorrow's hunt." Putting down my phone, I pressed the accelerator. The car glided silently into the darkness, like a blade cutting through the night. This was only the beginning. When I returned to my Manhattan apartment, it was already 11 at night. The city was still awake. Looking down from my 45th floor apartment, New York appeared like a river flowing with gold and desire. I did not turn on the lights, just poured a glass of whiskey and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Tonight's victory did not bring me the anticipated euphoria. Instead, there was only a deep sense of exhaustion. That was the side effect after adrenaline wore off. Was I still that little girl who craved her father's praise? No. That little girl died on that rainy day 8 years ago. Standing here now was Sophia Gray, Silicon Valley's new elite, a cold-blooded capitalist. But I had to admit, seeing Victor's momentary fear gave me a twisted pleasure. The doorbell rang. Only one person would come looking for me at this hour. I opened the door to find David Wells standing there with takeout bags and a stack of documents. He wore his signature wrinkled trench coat, excitement gleaming behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "I knew you didn't eat dinner," David said, holding up the paper bag. "General Tso's chicken from Chinatown, plus 2 orders of fried rice. It might not match your current net worth, but it's definitely more filling than Gray family's so-called French cuisine." I stepped aside to let him in. "You're not here just to deliver takeout at this hour?" "Of course not." David entered the living room, skillfully placing the takeout on the coffee table, then spreading out the documents. "Since you declared war tonight, We need to ensure every step tomorrow is foolproof. That old fox Victor won't just roll over and die. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, opening the takeout containers. The steaming aroma instantly dispelled the room's coldness. What can he do? I speared a piece of chicken with my fork. He has no liquid assets. His assets are all mortgaged to banks, and now I'm his largest creditor. Don't underestimate a cornered narcissist, David said, biting into a spring roll and speaking with his mouth full. I checked, and Victor has been getting cozy with Ethan Vance lately. At that name, my movements paused. Ethan Vance, Wall Street's famous vulture, head of Vance Capital. This man was known for his ruthless efficiency, specializing in acquiring distressed companies, dismantling assets, selling for profit, leaving nothing but debris. Victor wants to sell the company to Ethan Vance? I frowned. Very likely. David pushed his glasses up. If Victor realizes he can't save the company, he'd rather destroy it or sell to outsiders than lose to his own daughter. That's just his character. If Vance intervenes and helps him pay off that $45 million in debt, your leverage becomes useless. I put down my fork, my appetite completely gone. If Ethan Vance entered the game, things would indeed become troublesome. That was an opponent 100 times more dangerous than Victor. We have to act before Vance does, I said, staring at the documents on the coffee table, my brain racing. Tomorrow's board meeting can't just be about debt collection. We need to complete the equity swap directly. How? David asked. Debt to equity conversion. I pointed to a clause in the documents. There's a provision here that if the debtor cannot repay within the grace period, the creditor has the right to convert the debt into voting preferred shares at 70% of market value. As long as Victor can't come up with the money tomorrow, I can immediately trigger this clause and become Gray Real Estate's largest shareholder. That requires board approval. Half the current board is already dissatisfied with Victor, I said with a cold smile. Victor has been stubborn and arrogant these past few years, causing continuous losses. The shareholders have long wanted to replace him. They just needed someone to lead them, someone who could bring new capital and new hope. And you are that new hope, David whistled. A $300 million tech mogul whose name alone could make Gray Real Estate's stock price hit the limit. Exactly. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking at my reflection in the glass. My eyes were sharp, full of ambition. David, help me contact those independent directors. Tell them I'd like to buy them coffee at 8 tomorrow morning, 1 hour before the board meeting starts. Location, the Starbucks across from Gray Tower. Starbucks? David raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound like a billionaire's meeting place. Precisely because it's Starbucks, it shows we're practical, doesn't it? Compared to Victor's office filled with cigar smoke and musty air, that place feels more like the beginning of a new era. David laughed and closed the file folder. Got it, boss. You'd better get a good night's sleep tonight. Tomorrow, you're going to commit regicide. The next morning, it was drizzling in Manhattan. The sky was gray, exactly like the color on my Columbia University graduation day. But my deep blue Chanel haute couture suit and Christian Louboutin red-soled shoes reminded me that everything was different now. 8:55 in the morning, my car stopped in front of Gray Real Estate Tower. This building on Fifth Avenue had once been the shrine of my childhood aspirations. Now, its glass facade looked somewhat dated, and the lobby design seemed outdated, exuding an air of decline. Ready? David asked from the passenger seat. Always ready. Opening the car door, reporters who had been waiting rushed forward. Clearly, last night's news had fermented faster than I had anticipated. Miss Gray, is it true that you're acquiring the family business? What's your father's response to this? Is this a hostile takeover? Camera flashes went off frantically. I did not answer any questions, simply walked through the crowd behind two bodyguards wearing sunglasses with an expressionless face and entered the building. The elevator numbers kept jumping, 20, 30, 45. The elevator door opened with a ding. Outside the top-floor conference room, Victor's secretary, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, who had worked for him for 20 years, stood panic-stricken, blocking the entrance. "Miss Sophia, oh no, Miss Gray, you cannot go in. Mr. Gray is in a closed-door meeting without appointments." "Step aside, Patricia." I did not slow my pace, my voice quiet, but carrying undeniable authority. "I'm here to attend the meeting." "But," David stepped forward with a smile, handing over a document. "This is a legal notice. Miss Sophia Gray is now the company's largest creditor and potential controlling shareholder. According to company bylaws, she has the right to attend." Taking advantage of Patricia's momentary confusion, the bodyguards pushed open that heavy mahogany door. The conference room was filled with smoke. 12 directors sat around the oval table, mostly gray-haired old men. Victor sat at the head position, waving a cigar while saying something. Seeing me burst in, his voice stopped abruptly, and cigar ash fell onto the table. "Who let you in?" Victor slammed the table and stood up, his face even worse than last night's, his eyes bloodshot. All eyes in the room focused on me. There was surprise, scrutiny, and expectation. I removed my sunglasses, casually handing them to David behind me, then walked with steady steps toward the other end of the long table, the empty seat directly facing Victor. "Good morning, uncles and gentlemen," I said, looking around the room, my gaze pausing for a second on those independent directors I had met that morning, who nodded slightly in acknowledgement. "Sorry to interrupt your closed-door meeting, but I believe, since this ship is sinking, you wouldn't mind hearing what the ship's new captain has to say." "New captain?" Victor laughed in fury. "Security! Where's security? Get this crazy woman out of here!" No security came. The building's property management had long been dissatisfied with Victor for unpaid management fees, and David had just settled the front desk with a few $100 bills downstairs. "Save it, Victor," I said, pulling out a chair and sitting down with the elegance of someone attending afternoon tea. "Let's talk business. Before I came in, I checked the stock price. Gray Real Estate opened down 8% this morning. Without strong positive news or new capital injection, the bank will freeze the company's accounts this afternoon." I placed a beautifully bound presentation on the table. "This is my proposal." I did not look at Victor, but addressed the board members directly. "I will cancel the company's $45 million in debt through debt-to-equity conversion. Additionally, I commit to personally injecting $50 million into the company over the next 6 months to restart the stalled Long Island Commercial Center project." Low murmurs arose in the conference room. $50 million in cash was a lifeline for Gray Real Estate in its current state. "What are the conditions?" asked an elderly director with glasses. He was a company veteran and Victor's longtime adversary. "Very simple." I raised my head, looking directly at Victor. "Remove Victor Gray from his positions as chairman and CEO, restructure the board, rename the company SG Holdings." "How dare you!" Victor roared, throwing the documents in his hand at me. Papers flew through the air like ridiculous snow. I did not even blink. "Let's vote," I said coldly. Victor looked around, trying to find allies. "You wouldn't believe this brat, would you? What does she know about real estate? I'm the company's founder. Without me, this place is nothing." However, he was met with deathly silence. In this room where profit reigned supreme, past sentiments were as cheap as that fallen cigar ash. Everyone was calculating. Following the soon-to-be bankrupt Victor meant certain death, while following Sophia, who held $300 million and carried Silicon Valley prestige, might mean great profits. I second Sophia's proposal. The elderly director with glasses was the first to raise his hand. Then came the second, the third. Those independent directors who had just had coffee with me that morning raised their hands one by one. Finally, even some of Victor's loyalists hesitantly raised their hands. Victor stood frozen, watching this scene in disbelief. He was like a lion whose spine had been removed, instantly aging 10 years. "The motion passes," David announced calmly from the side. "Mr. Victor, according to the resolution, you are fired." Victor slumped back into his chair, his lips trembling as if trying to say something, but unable to make a sound. He looked at me, his eyes no longer filled with anger, but with deep bewilderment and despair. At that moment, I thought I would feel euphoric. But strangely, my heart felt only empty desolation. I had won. I had completely defeated this once arrogant father, taking away what he treasured most. But I felt no satisfaction from revenge, only sadness. For this moment, we had become complete enemies. Meeting adjourned. I stood up, not sparing Victor another glance. "David, notify the legal department to prepare handover procedures. Also, send an announcement to the media. Gray Real Estate is about to be reborn." I strode out of the conference room, my high heels clicking against the marble floor in the hallway. Only after entering the elevator and watching the doors close did I lean against the cold metal wall and exhale deeply. My palms were covered in cold sweat. "You did very well," David said quietly. "In that moment, you truly looked like a queen." "Did I?" I closed my eyes wearily. Why do I feel like an executioner? When we exited the building, the rain had stopped, but this war was far from over. New smoke was already drifting our way. A black Maybach was arrogantly parked in front of my Tesla, blocking the way. The window slowly rolled down, revealing a face with deep features and a somewhat cynical smile. It was Ethan Vance. He looked younger than in his photos, and more dangerous. His eyes were an unusual deep gray, like the ocean before a storm, impossible to fathom. "Magnificent," he said, clapping without getting out of the car, just looking at me through the window. "In just one morning, you completed a textbook hostile takeover. Sophia Gray, you're more interesting than the rumors suggest." I stopped, signaling the bodyguards not to act rashly. "Mr. Vance," I nodded politely, but distantly. "If you're here to see Victor, he should still be upstairs packing. Though as former chairman, he probably can't sign any legally binding contracts now." Ethan Vance laughed, his voice low and magnetic. "I don't look for losers," he said, pushing open the car door and stepping out with his long legs, walking up to me. He was tall, a head taller than me, and this height created a sense of pressure that forced me to look up at him slightly. "I'm here for the winner." He handed me a black business card with only a name and phone number, no title, because his name itself was a symbol of power. "I hear you're planning to restart the Long Island project?" he asked casually. "Gray Real Estate's mess isn't just about debt. If you need financial leverage or need someone to help you clean up some stubborn old fossils, Vance Capital is very interested." "Are you proposing partnership or acquisition?" I asked warily. "Partnership, for now." Ethan leaned closer, near my ear, a distance that was somewhat inappropriate, but I caught the faint scent of tobacco and mint on him. "But if you mess up, then it becomes acquisition." His eyes held naked aggression, the excitement of meeting a worthy opponent. In Silicon Valley, those engineering nerds only communicated with me through code, but this man was testing my boundaries in a primitive, wild way. "I don't lack money, Mr. Vance," I said, stepping back half a step to create distance. "And I don't like sharing prey with vultures." "Don't speak too soon." Ethan showed no anger. Instead, his smile deepened. Gray real estate's waters run deeper than you think. The hidden debts and legal disputes Victor left behind will give you headaches soon enough. When that time comes, you'll find I'm your only trustworthy ally, or devil. With that, he did not linger, turning gracefully to get back in his car. Good luck, Sophia. I'll be watching you. The Maybach drove away. I gripped that black business card, my fingertips turning slightly white from the pressure. David approached, watching the departing car. Ethan Vance. That guy devours people without spitting out bones. Looks like we just drove away one wolf only to attract a tiger. Let him watch then. I stuffed the business card into my suit pocket, my eyes regaining their determination. Whether it's wolves or tigers, this is my territory now. Anyone who wants to take a bite out of me will get their teeth knocked out. The following month was a chaotic, forced march. I practically lived at the company. Layoffs, restructuring, negotiations, appeasing banks, restarting projects. Every task was like a small war. I used ruthless methods to clear out Victor's old guard and promoted a group of young executives. The company began circulating my nickname, the Tyrant in Prada. I did not care. As long as stock prices rose and projects progressed, let them call me a tyrant. Victor completely disappeared. According to Eleanor, he had moved to a vacation house in Florida, playing golf all day and refusing to watch any financial news. He was like an ostrich with its head in the sand, pretending none of this had happened. And Eleanor, she remained in the Long Island mansion. I sent her a large sum every month, but our phone calls became increasingly rare. Each conversation was filled with awkward silence and polite small talk. I had won the company, but seemed to have lost the last remnant of what could be called family. Until that Friday night. I worked late into the night, sitting alone in the chairman's office. This office had been completely renovated by me. The originally luxurious, complex Baroque style had been replaced with minimalist modern design, and Victor's massive mahogany desk had been swapped for a transparent glass table. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking Fifth Avenue's nightscape. Suddenly, I remembered that oath from 8 years ago. I swear I will never again live seeking his approval. Now I had achieved that. I not only did not need his approval, but had trampled him underfoot. Yet why, when I looked at my reflection in the window glass, did I still see that lonely girl? My phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? It's me. A familiar yet aged voice came through the phone. It was Victor. I was stunned. This was the first time he had contacted me since that day's board meeting. What do you want? My voice instinctively tensed, preparing for defense. I saw today's Wall Street Journal. Victor's voice sounded somewhat hoarse, lacking its former arrogance, carrying only deep weariness. They said the Long Island project's pre-sales broke records. That VR house viewing technology you used, it's a good idea. My hand holding the phone trembled slightly. This was the first time in my life that Victor Gray had praised me. Not because I got first place, not because I married some wealthy scion, but because I had truly outperformed him in business. That's necessary. I tried to keep my voice calm. Times have changed, Victor. Yes, times have changed, he sighed, falling silent for a long moment. Sophia. What? That chair. Is it comfortable to sit in? I looked at the executive chair behind me, symbolizing ultimate power. It was expensive and ergonomic, but sitting in it always felt cold. It's hard, I answered honestly. A short, bitter laugh came through the phone. You'll get used to it. That chair was never comfortable. It devours people, makes you lose everyone, makes you unlike yourself. But in my lifetime, it was all I had left. Now it's yours. Victor, don't misunderstand. I still hate you for stealing my company. His tone regained some hardness, but it was more like a retired general's final instruction to a new recruit. But don't let the gray name disappear from Wall Street, and be careful of Ethan Vance. That bastard is greedier than I ever was. The phone hung up. Listening to the dial tone, I suddenly felt my eyes growing warm. This was not reconciliation. We could never have that kind of warm father-daughter affection. This was a transfer of power, mutual recognition between two wolves. He had finally acknowledged my strength, and I finally understood some of his past coldness. When you sit in that position, to survive, you must cut away the weak parts. I put down the phone and wiped away a tear that may not have existed at the corner of my eye. Just then, someone knocked on the office door. "Come in!" David walked in, followed by someone I had not expected, Ethan Vance. "Sorry to disturb you so late," Ethan said, wearing a black trench coat and carrying a bottle of champagne. "I heard about the record pre-sales." I felt if I didn't come celebrate, it would be inexcusable. David shrugged helplessly. He insisted on coming up, and he said he brought a gift you couldn't refuse. I looked at Ethan, this dangerous man. "What gift?" Ethan placed the champagne on my glass table and pulled a USB drive from his trench coat pocket, gently pushing it toward me. "I know Victor has some historical issues with overseas accounts that might attract regulatory attention," he said with a curved smile, his eyes gleaming with predatory light. "I helped you settle them. Consider it a greeting gift, or perhaps a token of allegiance." I looked at that USB drive, then at him. This was not just help. This was a display of power, telling me he held leverage over me but chose to help. "In this circle, there are no free gifts," I said. "Of course," Ethan approached me, this time not crossing boundaries but extending his hand. "I want in, not acquisition. Partnership, SG Holdings plus Vance Capital, we could devour all of Manhattan." I looked at his extended hand, long, strong, full of ambition. This was my new life. No warm family dinners, only business alliances filled with calculation and strategy. But I liked it. I extended my hand and grasped his. His palm was dry and warm. "Deal, Mr. Vance, but if you try to backstab me, I'll make you lose worse than Victor." Ethan smiled, a genuinely pleased expression. "I look forward to it, Miss Gray." Outside the window, New York's lights remained brilliant. I turned around, looking at this city of desire. In this concrete jungle, I was no longer anyone's daughter, no longer anyone's accessory. I was Sophia Gray. This was my era. The weeks following our handshake agreement with Ethan Vance moved with the relentless pace of a Manhattan rush hour. Every morning brought new challenges, new opportunities, and new tests of the alliance we had forged in that smoke-filled boardroom. Our first joint venture was the Long Island Commercial Center, a project that had been Victor's white whale. Under his management, it had become a money pit, plagued by cost overruns, regulatory delays, and a design that felt outdated before ground was even broken. But with fresh capital and Ethan's connections throughout the city planning department, we were rewriting the entire playbook. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our newly established war room, a sleek conference space on the 42nd floor that had become the nerve center of our operation. I arrived at 7:30, as had become my habit, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the latest market reports. Ethan was already there, of course. The man seemed to require even less sleep than I did. He stood before a massive digital display showing architectural renderings, financial projections, and a complex web of timelines that would have given most project managers nightmares. "Good morning, partner," he said without turning around, somehow sensing my presence. "I hope one of those cups is for me. I have news that requires caffeine to fully appreciate." I handed him the black coffee, no cream, no sugar, exactly how he preferred it. Over the past month, we had learned each other's habits with the precision of seasoned dance partners. "What kind of news?" I asked, settling into one of the leather chairs that had replaced Victor's ostentatious mahogany furniture. "The kind that makes billionaires out of millionaires," Ethan replied, finally turning to face me with that characteristic smile that somehow managed to be both charming and predatory. "The city just approved our zoning variance for mixed-use development. We can now build residential towers alongside the commercial space." I nearly spilled my coffee. That zoning approval had been the holy grail, the one piece of bureaucratic puzzle that could transform our project from merely profitable to legendary. Victor had been fighting for it for 3 years without success. "How?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "Let's just say that certain members of the Planning Commission have developed a sudden appreciation for the arts," Ethan said, pulling up another screen that showed renderings of a proposed community theater and art gallery. Amazing how civic-minded people become when you offer to fund their pet projects. It was brilliant, of course. Instead of the crude bribery that Victor might have attempted, Ethan had identified what each decision-maker genuinely cared about and found ways to align our interests with theirs. The planning commissioner, who loved theater, got her community playhouse. The environmental advocate got green building certifications that exceeded city requirements. The affordable housing activist got 20% of units reserved for middle-income families. "This changes everything," I said, my mind already racing through the implications. "With residential towers, we're looking at a billion-dollar development instead of a $200 million shopping center." "Exactly. And here's the beautiful part. We own the land outright, thanks to your inheritance of Victor's debts. No ground leases, no partnerships we don't want. This is going to be the crown jewel of Long Island development." The excitement in his voice was infectious, but years of hard-won experience had taught me to look for the catch. In deals this good, there was always a catch. "What's the timeline?" I asked. 18 months to break ground, another 24 to completion, but there's a complication." Ethan's expression grew more serious. "Word is starting to leak about the zoning approval. By this afternoon, every major developer in the city is going to be circling like sharks, trying to figure out how to get a piece of this action." "Let them circle," I said. "We control the land." "Yes, but we don't control the politics. Once this becomes public knowledge, suddenly every city councilman and community activist is going to have opinions about our project. Opinions that could be expensive to manage." I walked to the window, looking down at the ant-like figures of people hurrying along Fifth Avenue. From this height, the complexity of their individual lives was invisible. They were just elements in the greater pattern of the city, much like the various stakeholders we would need to manage for this project. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "We go public with it ourselves, control the narrative before someone else does. I've already scheduled a press conference for this afternoon. Mayor's office, full dog and pony show. You'll be the face of it. Young, successful, local girl, made good, returning to invest in her community." The idea of facing another media circus made my stomach tighten. Ever since the first news stories about my acquisition of gray real estate, I had been the subject of constant scrutiny. Every outfit choice, every public appearance, every business decision was analyzed by reporters and commentators who seemed to have nothing better to do than speculate about my motivations. "I hate press conferences," I admitted. "I know, but you're good at them, and more importantly, people trust you. You're not some carpet-bagging corporate raider coming in to strip assets and leave. You're Sophia Gray, Silicon Valley success story, bringing innovation and capital back to New York." He was right, of course. Public perception would be crucial for a project of this magnitude. One viral video of angry community members protesting outside our construction site could add months of delays and millions in costs. Fine, I said. But I want complete control over the messaging, and I want David there to handle the legal questions. Already arranged, David's putting together a press packet as we speak. Background on the project, economic impact studies, environmental assessments, everything the reporters will want to know. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and felt a familiar tightness in my chest. The message was from Eleanor. Saw the news about the zoning approval. Your father would be proud. Will you be at the press conference? I'd like to be there to support you. I stared at the screen for a long moment. In all the months since Victor's ouster, Eleanor had maintained a careful neutrality. She accepted my financial support, but avoided taking sides in the family drama. Her offer to publicly support me at a press conference was significant. Everything all right? Ethan asked, noticing my distraction. My mother wants to attend the press conference, I said. She's never done anything like that before. Good. Family support plays well with the media. Shows you're not the cold corporate villain some people like to paint you as. I wasn't sure if Eleanor's presence would help or complicate matters, but I found myself typing a response. Press conference at 3 p.m., City Hall. I'd like you there. The response came back immediately. I'll be there. Love you, sweetheart. Those last 3 words hit me harder than I expected. It had been months since anyone had told me they loved me without expecting something in return. I need to make a call, I said, stepping out onto the small balcony that adjoined our conference room. The number I dialed was one I had not used in weeks. Patricia, Victor's former secretary, had kept her personal phone number the same even after losing her job at Gray Real Estate. I had been sending her a monthly check, not out of guilt, but because 20 years of loyalty deserved better than a pink slip. Hello, Sophia, Patricia answered on the second ring. Her voice carried the same professional warmth it always had, though there was an underlying sadness that hadn't been there during Victor's reign. Patricia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, dear. How is he, really? There was a long pause. When Patricia spoke again, her voice was softer, more personal than it had ever been during our professional interactions. He's lost, Sophia. The golf, the fishing, the retirement activities, they're just ways to fill time. He watches the business news obsessively, reads every article about your successes. He won't admit it, but I think he's proud of you, terrified of you, but proud. And his health? Not good. The stress, the drinking, it's aged him terribly. His doctor has been after him about his blood pressure, but you know how stubborn he can be. I did know Victor's stubbornness had been both his greatest strength and his ultimate weakness as a businessman. Patricia, I want you to do something for me. Set up a trust fund for his medical expenses, anonymous donor. He doesn't need to know it came from me. Sophia, that's very generous, but you know he'd never accept. He won't know. As far as he's concerned, it's from some grateful former business associate. Can you arrange that? Yes, I think I can. Thank you, dear. He may have been too proud to say it, but you're a good daughter. After hanging up, I remained on the balcony for several more minutes, watching the city pulse with its endless energy. Somewhere in Florida, a broken old man was probably sitting on a golf course, trying to forget that his life's work now belonged to the daughter he had never learned how to love properly. The thought should have given me satisfaction, but instead it just felt hollow. When I returned to the conference room, Ethan was on a call with someone, speaking in rapid-fire sentences about permit approvals and construction timelines. He gestured for me to wait, then wrapped up his conversation with characteristic efficiency. Sorry about that. Site preparation coordinator. We need to move fast once this goes public." He studied my face carefully. "You look like someone who just made peace with a ghost." "Something like that," I said. "Are you ready for this afternoon?" "The question is, are you ready? Once we announce this project, there's no going back. We'll be committed to one of the largest private developments in New York's recent history. The pressure, the scrutiny, the responsibility, it's going to be intense." I thought about his words, about the magnitude of what we were undertaking. $1 billion development would employ thousands of people, house hundreds of families, and reshape an entire community. The decisions we made in boardrooms would ripple out into thousands of individual lives. "I've been ready for this my entire life," I said. "I just didn't know it until now." The press conference took place in the ornate press room at City Hall, a space that had hosted countless announcements throughout New York's history. The room was packed with reporters, photographers, city officials, and curious onlookers who had somehow managed to secure credentials. I stood at the podium wearing a navy blue suit that David had insisted projected both authority and approachability. To my left sat Mayor Patricia Williams, a pragmatic politician who understood that successful development projects meant jobs and tax revenue. To my right, Ethan maintained his characteristic pose of relaxed confidence. In the third row, I spotted Eleanor. She wore a simple but elegant gray dress and had clearly had her hair done for the occasion. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave me an encouraging nod. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room's sound system. 3 years ago, the Long Island Commercial Development Project was stalled, over budget, and facing an uncertain future. Today, I'm here to announce that project's rebirth as Harbor Commons, a mixed-use development that will combine retail, residential, and community spaces in a way that serves both economic growth and neighborhood needs. The room stirred with interest as I outlined the project's scope. $1 billion in investment, 3,000 construction jobs, 800 permanent residential units, 20% of which would be designated affordable housing, a community theater, public green spaces, and retail anchored by both national brands and local businesses. This project represents more than just real estate development, I continued. It's about creating a community where families can live, work, and thrive. It's about bringing Silicon Valley innovation to New York tradition. And it's about proving that ambitious development and community responsibility can go hand in hand. The questions came fast and aggressive, as I had expected. "Miss Gray, critics say you're just another wealthy developer gentrifying working-class neighborhoods. How do you respond to those concerns?" I had prepared for this one. "I understand those concerns because I share them. That's why 20% of our residential units will be permanently affordable, why we're requiring local hiring preferences for construction jobs,